Before we dive into this story, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and stay until the end, because what happened inside that prison cell will chill you to your core. This isn't fiction. This is what really happened, and it was ignored until it was too late. The guards said he was faking it. The inmates said he was desperate. By the time anyone realized the truth, his body was already cold. A thin, frail figure lying on the dirty concrete floor of cell 204. His lips were blue, his eyes open but glassy, a half-empty cup beside him still smelling faintly of bleach. The clock on the wall read 7:42 a.m. He'd been calling for help all night, but no one came. His name was Ethan Cole, 34 years old, convicted of armed robbery, sentenced to 10 years in St. Clair Correctional Facility, Alabama. But what happened to Ethan wasn't about his crime. It was about what happens when a man becomes invisible behind bars, when his voice stops mattering. The night before his death, other inmates said Ethan had been pacing his cell, banging on the bars, shouting that he didn't feel well. The guards ignored him, assuming he wanted attention again. He'd filed over 20 medical requests in the last 6 months. Chest pains, dizziness, stomach cramps, all met with the same answer: put in another slip. But the system moves slower than death itself. Desperate, he tried something unthinkable. He found a bottle of cleaning fluid, the kind used by inmates for bathroom duty, and swallowed enough to make anyone sick. His plan was simple: make himself so ill that the guards would have to call medical. He wanted to live, not die. But that night, the prison was short-staffed, and the guard on duty, Officer Daniels, was covering 3 tiers alone. Daniels shouted through the bars, "You'll be fine, Cole. Sleep it off." By midnight, Ethan was lying on the floor, clutching his stomach, vomiting bile. Other inmates yelled for help, banging metal cups on their doors. No one came. Hours passed. The screams quieted. Then came silence. When the morning count began, the guards found him motionless, a trail of vomit beside his bed. The infirmary later confirmed he died of acute poisoning. But the real poison had been neglect, slow, deliberate, bureaucratic indifference that killed him long before the chemicals did. And yet, something about that night didn't add up. Why was the camera outside his cell turned off for 6 hours? Why did one of the officers who logged the night shift suddenly request a transfer the next day? Ethan may have been ignored, but what if he had discovered something? Something that made him a problem? Because just 2 weeks earlier, he had written a letter, one that vanished after his death, addressed to the Department of Justice, claiming he had evidence of corruption inside the facility. What was in that letter? And why did no one ever find it? The truth behind Ethan Cole's death didn't end with that poison cup. It began there. The investigation into Ethan Cole's death began like every other prison incident, a formality to tick off a list, a quick report to keep the headlines quiet. The warden, a man named Charles Denton, stood before the press 2 days later, reading from a pre-written statement. The inmate, Ethan Cole, was found unresponsive in his cell during morning rounds. Preliminary reports suggest self-harm. The facility staff followed all standard procedures. His voice was calm, sterile, rehearsed. Behind him, the American flag fluttered on a pole. Inside the prison, the truth was rotting in silence. Inmates who knew Ethan whispered that he'd been scared for weeks before his death. He said someone was after him. One of them later told a reporter. He said he saw something he shouldn't have. No one knew what that meant. Not at first. But everyone remembered the night he stopped sleeping. The night the cameras went dark. Ethan had worked in the prison's janitorial detail, a low-risk job that gave him access to hallways and offices most inmates never saw. He cleaned the administrative wing every Thursday, scrubbing floors near the warden's office, wiping down tables where guards played cards after hours. And that's where it started. One evening, while cleaning near the staff room, Ethan overheard 2 officers arguing. Their voices were sharp, nervous. He caught bits of their conversation: money missing, shipment, cover it up. When he turned the corner, they stopped talking. Both men glared at him. One of them, Officer Daniels, said coldly, "You didn't hear a damn thing, Cole." But Ethan had heard enough to know something was off. Over the next week, he began noticing things, small things that didn't make sense. Packages being logged in at midnight. Inmates being moved without paperwork. Guards entering the evidence room when no one was supposed to. Ethan wasn't a saint, but he wasn't stupid. He began writing it all down in a notebook he kept hidden beneath his mattress. Names, dates, times. By the time he finished, he'd built a quiet map of corruption, a web that connected guards, administrators, and even outside suppliers. He planned to send everything to an outside contact, his sister, Melissa, who worked as a nurse in Birmingham. She was the only family he had left. Ethan told her during a phone call, "If something happens to me, promise me you'll tell someone. Promise me you'll make noise." But Melissa never got the letter. When she called the prison after his death, no one answered her questions. They said his belongings had been disposed of for sanitation reasons. She begged for his notebook, for anything, even a copy of his last phone call. They said the tapes were overwritten. Every door she knocked on was locked. Inside the prison, rumors spread like wildfire. Some inmates said they saw a guard enter Ethan's cell hours before he got sick. Others claimed the cleaning supplies that night had been switched, that the poison wasn't what Ethan drank by accident, but something given to him. One inmate swore he saw Officer Daniels carry a plastic bag out of Ethan's cell after the screams stopped. But no one dared speak too loudly. Everyone in St. Clair knew how silence was enforced, sometimes with a transfer, sometimes with a beating, and sometimes with a suicide. When the internal report was finally released, it was 6 pages long, thin, vague, and missing key logs from the night shift. Daniel's statement was short. Inmate Cole refused medical attention. I believed he was exaggerating. Another officer's testimony contradicted that, saying Daniels never even checked on him. Still, the case was quietly closed. Self-inflicted death. Yet Melissa refused to let it end there. She contacted journalists, lawyers, and even a former federal investigator who specialized in prison abuse cases, a man named Robert Hale. Hale was known for digging into dirty systems, the kind that hide their crimes behind thick concrete and bureaucracy. When he read the details of Ethan's case, he knew something didn't fit. No man drinks poison unless he's screaming to be heard, Hale said in an interview later. He reopened the case privately, outside the prison's jurisdiction, and within weeks, he found something shocking. The surveillance logs from the night Ethan died were deliberately erased 3 hours after his death. Someone inside had wiped the data clean. But Hale didn't stop there. He discovered financial records linking several correctional officers to an external contractor that supplied cleaning products and equipment to the prison. Payments that didn't make sense. Hidden transfers. A small trail of dirty money disguised as maintenance expenses. The deeper he looked, the more dangerous it became. One night, as Hale was driving home, a black SUV followed him for 6 miles before disappearing. He told a colleague the next day, "This isn't just about a dead inmate. This is about a system that kills people to protect its secrets." Ethan Cole may have died inside a cell, but outside those walls, someone was finally listening. The question now wasn't how he died. It was why, and who made sure he would never speak again. Robert Hale knew he was dealing with more than a negligence case. Every piece of evidence pointed toward something organized, something layered deep beneath the daily chaos of prison life. He spent weeks combing through staff rosters, supply invoices, and incident reports from the months leading up to Ethan Cole's death. What he found painted a disturbing picture. The same cleaning supply contractor, Southgate Logistics, had connections to 3 other correctional facilities across Alabama, and in each of those prisons, at least one inmate had died under unexplained circumstances. One of them, a man named Louise Parker, had written letters to his mother describing the same patterns. Guards threatening inmates who spoke up, cameras conveniently malfunctioning, requests for medical help going ignored. Louise's last letter ended with a line that haunted Hale. "They don't kill you fast here. They let you die loud enough for others to hear." The deeper Hale went, the more resistance he met. Prison staff refused interviews. Warden Denton stopped returning calls, and the Department of Corrections claimed no irregularities had been found. But then, one night, Hale got an anonymous email. No name, no greeting, Just one sentence and an attachment. Ethan wasn't supposed to die. He was supposed to be silenced. The file attached was grainy security footage, a few seconds long, time-stamped the night Ethan died. It showed a shadowed figure outside his cell, slipping something through the bars. The footage cut out before the face could be seen, but Hale recognized the uniform. It was an officer's sleeve, and on that sleeve, barely visible in the low light, was a stitched name tag, Daniels. That was the first real proof. Hale immediately contacted Melissa Cole, telling her she needed to prepare herself. This was no longer about neglect, but about murder. Melissa broke down in silence. "He told me they were going to make him disappear," she whispered. "He told me he was scared of Daniels." Determined to confront the prison directly, Hale drove to St. Clair the next morning. The heat shimmered off the razor wire as he stood outside the facility, waiting for permission to enter. When he finally met Warden Denton, the man's expression was a mask, polite but cold. "Mr. Hale," Denton said, his voice tight, "I understand your persistence, but this case has been reviewed. We don't need outsiders stirring up unrest." Hale slid a copy of the video across the desk. Denton's eyes flickered. He didn't touch the USB drive. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. Hale didn't answer. The silence between them felt heavier than the walls around them. That night, Denton made a call from his office, one that wasn't logged in official records. "We have a problem," he said into the receiver. "He's digging deeper than we thought." The next morning, Hale's car alarm went off at dawn. His windows were smashed, and a dead rat lay on the driver's seat with a note taped to its tail, "Stop chasing ghosts." But Hale wasn't the kind of man who backed down. He sent the footage to 2 trusted journalists at the Birmingham Ledger and continued digging. Meanwhile, inside the prison, tension was rising. Inmates whispered about the investigator on the outside. Guards were nervous, especially Daniels. He started missing shifts, requesting sudden leave, claiming family emergencies. But the whispers didn't stop. Word spread that Daniels had been seen leaving Ethan's tier that night with something hidden under his jacket. A week later, Hale got a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was low, cautious, and full of fear. "I work here," the man said. "I can't talk long." "You're right about Cole." Daniels didn't act alone. He was following orders. Denton wanted him quiet before that letter left the prison. The line went dead before Hale could respond. That anonymous call confirmed everything. Ethan had been silenced because he'd discovered corruption at the heart of the facility. But Hale still didn't know how deep it went, or how far Denton's reach extended. He needed that missing letter, the one Ethan wrote before his death. Then, a break came from the most unlikely place. Melissa received a small brown envelope in her mailbox, postmarked from Montgomery, with no return address. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, a copy of Ethan's handwritten note. The words were shaky but clear. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. They're running drugs and money through the supply trucks. Guards, staff, even Dent. Don't trust anyone in uniform." At the bottom, he'd signed his name in a faint, smudged pen. Melissa called Hale immediately. "It's real," she said, her voice trembling. He was trying to expose them. Hale read the letter over and over, each word cutting deeper. It wasn't just about one man's death. It was about a system built to bury the truth. Now, Hale knew exactly what he had to do, take the evidence public. But someone inside St. Clair was already one step ahead. That night, another inmate connected to Ethan's work crew was found hanging in his cell. The death was ruled suicide. The message was clear. They were erasing every loose end. The news of another inmate's suicide hit Melissa like a wave of déjà vu. It was happening again. The same pattern, the same excuse, the same cold statement from the warden's office claiming no foul play suspected. But Melissa wasn't fooled anymore. She called Robert Hale in a panic, her voice shaking. "They're cleaning house," she said. "Whoever helped Ethan is next." Hale didn't argue. He already knew. By that time, the 2 journalists from the Birmingham Ledger had published the first article exposing possible corruption inside St. Clair Correctional Facility. The story was bold but cautious. It mentioned the suspicious deaths, the missing footage, and the untraceable payments linked to Southgate Logistics. But they stopped short of naming anyone directly. They needed more. They needed a confession or undeniable proof. Inside St. Clair, tension turned electric. Guards were edgy, inmates restless. The moment someone mentioned Ethan Cole's name, conversations went quiet. Even Officer Daniels began looking over his shoulder. He wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating. He'd become paranoid, convinced someone was watching him. And he was right. Hale had managed to get in contact with a former inmate named Trevor Banks, who had worked alongside Ethan in the janitorial crew. Trevor was released only 2 months after Ethan's death, and he'd been living in a small apartment on the outskirts of Montgomery, trying to stay out of trouble. When Hale found him, Trevor refused to talk at first. "You don't know what those people can do," he said, eyes darting toward the door. "They run everything in there. They got cops, lawyers, suppliers, all paid off. You talk, you disappear." But Hale didn't back off. He showed Trevor the letter Ethan had written, and something inside him cracked. He wasn't lying, Trevor whispered. He found out about the runs. "What runs?" Hale asked. Trevor exhaled. Every Friday night, the supply trucks came in, supposed to be cleaning chemicals, toiletries, basic stuff. But we knew. The crates were too heavy, sealed too tight. The guard would clear out the hallways. No cameras, no eyes. Sometimes we'd see packages being swapped out, boxes going in, different boxes coming out. Ethan started writing down license plates, times, all that. He said he was going to blow the whole thing up. Hale pressed him for more, but Trevor refused. "That's all I'm saying. If they find out I talked, I'm next." He looked terrified, and Hale knew pushing harder would only spook him. Still, the testimony was enough. Combined with the letter and financial records, it tied the corruption ring directly to Southgate Logistics and, by extension, to Warden Denton. Hale sent everything to his journalist contacts, preparing for a second expose that would name names. But before they could publish, something unexpected happened. Officer Daniels went missing. He clocked out one evening after his shift and was never seen again. His car was found abandoned near a rest stop off Interstate 65. Keys in the ignition, driver's door open, and his phone shattered on the ground. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no witnesses. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. When reporters questioned the prison, Denton simply said, "Officer Daniels is on personal leave." But Hale had already confirmed with Daniels' family that no such leave was requested. He knew what it meant. Daniels had become a liability. A week later, Hale received another anonymous message. This time, it wasn't an email. It was a small flash drive left in his mailbox, wrapped in brown tape. The note on top read, "Play it somewhere safe." Inside his office, Hale plugged it in. The screen flickered. What appeared was grainy surveillance footage from the prison loading dock, time-stamped 2 nights before Ethan Cole's death. The video showed uniformed officers unloading boxes from a Southgate truck, but instead of cleaning supplies, the crates were packed with small black duffel bags. One officer unzipped a bag, revealing stacks of cash and packets of white powder. The footage zoomed in slightly before freezing. Then the screen went black. At the end of the video, text appeared, a single, chilling line. "This is what Ethan saw." Hale's heart pounded. He knew this was the missing puzzle piece, but he also knew it painted a target on his back. That night, he called Melissa and told her to stay somewhere safe. "Don't go home," he said. "They know we're close." By morning, Hale's office was broken into. Files were scattered, drawers emptied. The flash drive was gone. But Hale wasn't done. He'd already made copies. He sent one to his journalist friends, one to a federal contact he trusted, and one to Melissa, sealed in an envelope with a note, "If anything happens to me, release this." Later that evening, Hale was driving along a quiet stretch of highway when headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, bright, close, following him for miles. He turned off at a diner parking lot, but the car didn't follow. When he returned to the road, his phone buzzed with a blocked number. A man's voice said, "You've seen too much, Hale. Walk away." Then the line went dead. By the next day, the second Ledger article was live. It named Warden Denton, linked Southgate Logistics to money laundering and narcotics smuggling, and exposed the suspicious deaths of multiple inmates, including Ethan Cole. The story exploded across social media. Lawmakers called for an immediate investigation. But inside St. Clair, panic turned violent. Inmates began rioting. Guards turned on each other. And somewhere inside that chaos, the truth that Ethan had died for was finally coming to light. Still, Hale knew the war wasn't over. Denton hadn't been arrested yet. Daniels was missing. And there were still people, powerful people, who would do anything to bury the truth forever. Because in prisons like St. Clair, silence isn't just survival. It's business. The aftermath of the Birmingham Ledger's expose hit the state of Alabama like a thunderclap. News anchors debated it every night. Protesters gathered outside the prison gates, and federal investigators finally descended on St. Clair Correctional Facility. For the first time in years, the institution that had operated in silence was now under the harsh light of national scrutiny. But inside those crumbling walls, chaos reigned. The prison had become a pressure cooker. Guards were quitting without notice. Inmates refused orders, and rumors swirled that Warden Denton had ordered documents destroyed before investigators arrived. What no one knew, however, was that the man who had started it all, Robert Hale, was being hunted from the shadows. Late one evening, Hale sat in a dimly lit motel room 2 towns over, his laptop glowing in the dark. He'd received another encrypted file from his anonymous contact. This time, it wasn't video, it was a list. A list of names and payment logs, tracing money from Southgate Logistics into multiple personal accounts. Some belonged to correctional officers. But one stood out, Denton. The warden's fingerprints were all over it. Hale printed everything, planning to deliver the evidence directly to the Justice Department the following morning. But as he packed his files, a faint noise outside made him freeze. Tires crunching gravel, a car door closing, then footsteps. He grabbed his phone, snapping a quick photo of the documents and sending them to Melissa with a message. If I don't make it tomorrow, go public. Then came a knock. Slow, deliberate. Hale, a voice said. It's Agent Thompson with the DOJ. We just want to talk. Hale hesitated. He hadn't contacted anyone named Thompson. Something was wrong. He stepped closer to the window, barely parting the curtain. Outside stood 2 men in dark suits. No badges visible, no government plates on the car. He didn't open the door. Moments later, the doorknob turned violently. Hale backed away, his heart pounding. The chain lock held as the door rattled. You're making this harder than it has to be, one of the men growled. Hale ran to the bathroom, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911, but the signal dropped. Dead zone. The motel's Wi-Fi was cut. Then silence. The footsteps retreated. Hale waited several minutes before peeking outside again, but the parking lot was empty. The car was gone. Only a single folded paper had been slipped under his door. It read, "The letter dies with you." By morning, Hale was on the road, exhausted but determined. He met with a federal contact, an actual DOJ agent named Karen Bishop, who had quietly followed the St. Clair case since Ethan's death. Hale handed her everything: the payment logs, the footage, Ethan's letter, and his timeline of the cover-up. She listened carefully, her face hardening with every detail. "You realize what you just put in my hands," she said. "This isn't just local corruption. This connects to state contracts, politicians, money that goes far beyond one prison." Hale nodded. "Then it's time they answer for it." While Bishop began assembling a federal task force, Hale and Melissa prepared for one final move, a televised interview. They wanted to show the world who Ethan Cole really was, not just an inmate, but a man who tried to speak up and was buried for it. The interview aired on a national network that following week. Melissa sat in front of the camera, her voice breaking as she held up her brother's letter. "He begged them for help," she said. "He wasn't trying to die. He was trying to live. And they ignored him until he was gone." The footage cut to Hale, who revealed parts of the evidence, blurred documents, names redacted, but enough to make clear that the corruption reached deep. The public outrage was immediate. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Ethan Cole and hashtag Ignored Until Dead trended across the country. But inside St. Clair, the backlash was brutal. Warden Denton was cornered. Investigators seized his office computer, his emails, and his financial records. The following morning, the FBI arrived with a warrant. As agents flooded the facility, inmates cheered, banging on their cell doors. Denton was found sitting calmly at his desk, staring at a photograph of his family. "You have no idea what you're opening," he told Agent Bishop as she cuffed him. "You think it ends with me? You're just cutting one head off the snake." By evening, news stations across the country reported his arrest. Headlines screamed, "Warden arrested in widespread corruption probe." The public celebrated, but Hale didn't. He knew Denton was right. Systems that dirty don't collapse from one man's fall. That night, Hale received another anonymous email. No subject, no text, just one attachment. A still frame from a security camera inside the prison parking lot. The timestamp was from that morning. The image showed two men in suits escorting a handcuffed Denton into a van, but the logo on the van wasn't federal. It was from Southgate Logistics. Below the image were 3 words, "He never left." Hale's blood ran cold. If the message was true, the warden wasn't in federal custody. He was being silenced, the same way Ethan was. And somewhere out there, the people who started it all were still free. The arrest of Warden Charles Denton should have been the end, the closure everyone had fought for. But Robert Hale knew better. The van footage proved that Denton never reached federal custody. The Department of Justice confirmed it the next morning. There was no official record of any transfer, no booking, no interrogation. It was as if he had simply vanished. Hale sat in his car outside the federal building, staring at the news notifications flooding his phone. Social media was on fire with speculation. Some said Denton had escaped. Others claimed he'd been suicided. But Hale knew it wasn't a mystery. It was a message. Someone was still pulling the strings, and they had just erased their most dangerous witness. He called Agent Bishop, but her line went straight to voicemail. Then, 2 hours later, she called him back from a blocked number. "Robert," she said quietly, "I can't talk long. Whatever you do, stay low. You were right. It goes higher than any of us thought. Contracts, money, entire prison systems, they're all connected through private suppliers. Denton was just one piece. Who's behind it?" Hale asked. A pause. Then she whispered, "Southgate isn't just a logistics company. It's a shell. It's owned by a network of private investors who profit off prison labor, state contracts, and F." The line cut off before Hale could respond. Hours later, Hale's car alarm blared again. This time there was no rat, no note, only a simple, folded photograph taped to the windshield. It was a still image of Ethan Cole. The same cell, same position. Only now, behind him on the wall, someone had drawn a red circle around the vent above his bed, and inside it, faintly visible, was a tiny black dot, a camera lens. Ethan hadn't died unseen. Someone had watched the entire thing. The realization hit Hale like a punch. The missing footage, the erased logs, the cover-up, it was all orchestrated from that hidden camera feed. Ethan's death had been recorded, and the person who controlled that feed had the final piece of evidence. Determined to end it once and for all, Hale traced the prison's old surveillance system back to an off-site data storage facility in Montgomery, a warehouse registered under one of Southgate's shell companies. He broke in that night with nothing but a flashlight and his phone camera. Dust coated everything. The servers hummed softly, like a sleeping monster. And then he found it, a folder labeled Archive_204. He opened it. There on the screen was the full video of Ethan Cole's final hours. Unedited, raw, Ethan pacing, Ethan yelling for help, Ethan collapsing. And then, the moment the world never saw, a uniformed figure unlocking his cell door. Officer Daniels stepped inside, crouched beside him, and whispered something Hale couldn't hear. Ethan looked up, weak, trying to speak. Daniels pressed a cloth to his mouth. Ethan went still. The officer stood, looked straight into the hidden camera, and nodded. Then the footage ended. Hale stood frozen. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't suicide. It was execution, disguised as indifference. He copied the file, uploaded it to a secure drive, and sent it to 3 major news outlets before leaving the warehouse. Within 24 hours, the footage went viral. The entire country watched in horror as the truth finally surfaced. An inmate ignored to death, his killer protected by a chain of corruption that stretched from cell blocks to corporate boardrooms. Investigations exploded nationwide. Southgate Logistics was shut down. Dozens of officials were arrested. But the true masterminds, the faceless investors, were never named. The money trail vanished overseas, buried under layers of shell corporations. Still, something remarkable happened. Because of Ethan Cole's story, new prison oversight laws were proposed across multiple states. Cameras became mandatory in every solitary unit. Whistleblower protection programs were expanded. His name became a symbol, not of tragedy, but of truth finally heard. Months later, Hale visited Ethan's grave. A small headstone in Birmingham, simple and quiet. Melissa was there too, placing fresh white lilies beside it. For a long time, they stood in silence. Then Hale said softly, he wanted someone to listen. Now the whole world did. Melissa nodded, tears glinting in the fading light. He didn't die for nothing. As Hale walked back to his car, his phone buzzed. A new message. No sender. No subject. Just one line. There are more like him. He stared at the screen, a cold shiver crawling down his spine. Somewhere out there, the machine still turned. Somewhere, another Ethan was being ignored. And Hale knew the fight wasn't over. Because in America's forgotten prisons, silence was still currency, and truth, the most dangerous contraband of all. If this story gripped you, if Ethan Cole's truth hit you like it hit me, then don't let it die here. Smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life stories that expose the darkness behind the bars. Because every time you share, every time you speak, you make sure their voices are never ignored again. Stay aware and stay alive.